And as before, I'll just remind you of the notifications on the inside front page of your agenda in relation to the hybrid meeting and the webcasting of the council. And can I ask for apologies for this meeting?
Yeah, we've the same two apologies that we had previously, which was Councillor Innes and Councillor Gray.
Councillor Innes and Councillor Gray, thank you. Declarations of interest or transparency statements, do we have any? None intimated. And the item on the agenda today for the special council meeting is the review of the scheme for the establishment of community councils. And I believe Councillor Doig has an amendment. We're going to circulate it just now, Councillor Doig.
I've given it to the officers' provost, so.
Yeah, we're just circulating it now amongst the members, and I'll give members a wee minute to read it. Do we have any other amendments? Councillor Graham. Graham Clark. Quite a second name for a second there. Having a senior moment. Okay, so can we circulate Councillor Clark's amendment? Is that done, Ewan? Okay, that's fine. If you can, someone can let me know when they've received both in their inbox, please. I'll give you a couple of minutes to read them. To remind the councillors who've just came back, we've circulated 2 amendments to your inbox. And I've been kicked out of the meeting again. Oh, I'm back in. Am I back in? No. Is that okay? No?
It's okay. The meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No.
Two amendments, so effectively one amendment is Councillor Boyd is keep the report but change a couple of things. Councillor Clark, which is effectively keep the report but change a couple of things. If nobody's wanting to move the report as is unamended, then we have a vote between those two positions.
Councillor Doig, do you want to speak to your amendment, please?
It's been circulated, provost. Yep. I'll amend it. I'll speak to the amendment.
Just for the record, who's your seconder?
Councillor Devine. Councillor Devine's my seconder.
And Councillor Clark, can you just confirm your seconder for your amendment? Councillor Chris Gilmer. Sorry, Andy.
That's okay. Right, provost, over the last year, elected members will be aware there have been some high-profile cases that have been well reported in the media and elsewhere in Renfrewshire Community Council and Ferguson Community Council, where community councils have engaged in politically partisan activity. Now, in Renfrew, social media posts were made attacking councillors with misleading information. The convener of Ferguson Community Council ended up in the front of the Paisley Daily Express stating that he didn't know community councils were meant to be non-political. Now, these exceptions to the rule take nothing away from the excellent job that the overwhelming number of local community councils local community councils do. And in fact, I attended Kilmartin Community Council on Tuesday night. It was just first class. We had some officers along to speak about heritage projects. We spoke about a number of local issues. It was an excellent meeting. Now, I mean, most community councils, especially in relation, I would say, to planning issues, do an excellent job in articulating the view of local residents on issues like that. But although the vast majority of community councils work well and work within the rules, I don't think this should blind us when some community councils cross that line and then move into the realm of party politics, especially as community councils are publicly funded. So the First Amendment would seek to the commencement of every community council meeting. The convener would read out clause 3.8. What this is the clause that refers to, in the scheme, that refers to political community councils being non-political and non-religious. That would be read out at the commencement of every community council meeting. I think it would have, what effect would that have? I think it could do two things. Firstly, quite often you get members of the public who attend community councils on a sort of ad hoc basis. They don't necessarily attend every month. If they were there for the first time, I think it would inform them that this is a non-party political forum. But secondly, I think it would just remind the regular community council members that they've got, as part of their duty, to be non-religious and non-political in their deliberations. So I think we need to deal with what's happened when things go wrong. And I think just having the code there, it doesn't seem to be enough. If it was enough provost, then we wouldn't have the issues arising that have arisen in the last year in certain places. So that's the rationale, I think, behind the First Amendment. The Second Amendment about stage 1 and 2, I think in relation to stage 1, well, I think it requires amendment because the status quo, it doesn't address the possibility that it might actually be the CC convener or indeed the whole CC committee that might be the problem or the issue with regard to any given dispute. So I think it makes more sense to recognise the role of the Renfrewshire Community Council Forum, which has a kind of position of oversight. And at that job, the stage 1 process should be given over to the convener of the Community Council Forum. The second point about stage 2, I have to say there's severe misgiving in the community councils in my own ward about this concept that community councils will police each other. They're concerned about the ramifications and implications. And a number of individuals have said they'll just walk away if that's approved as the process. And I think we need to really be aware of that. The community councils were introduced in 1973 by an Act of Parliament. Now, it's fallen to local government to both fund them and oversee them. So it's really our responsibility to examine them when things go wrong. Now, can I explain why I think the council does have a number of ad hoc panels that meet to deal with, for example, personnel appeals, provost. So an ad hoc panel in this context would be kind of like that. Why is it drawn from the Human Resources Department? Quite simply, I would say that a lot of the issues that tend to arise, whether it's personality clashes or whether it's issues to do with local matters that might arise in community councils or between community councillors, will tend to be the kind of thing, in my own experience, that you tend to get in the workplace. So I think that in that context, HR officers would be best placed to maybe adjudicate in this instance. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Doig. Councillor Devine, do you want to second?
Second, and just quickly say, if you don't mind, Rob,
Yep.
I think community councils are there to oversee what we do and they're perfectly entitled to have an opinion. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So there is obviously a range of what they can and cannot say. One or two of them seem to have overstepped the mark, and just a reminder to them that there is a level where you can't go further. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Devine. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Provost. And I want to begin by thanking all the volunteer members of community councils who've had to go through what is a substantial document. It was so big it couldn't even be emailed in one email. And I think a lot of them struggled to just fully understand the implications and all that, but I thank them because a lot of them have responded, and I wanted in my amendment to try and listen to what they're saying and to respond to that as we should. So there are many positives in this report about population-based administrative allowances, about timely submission of agendas and draft minutes, about flexible scheduling of annual general meetings, and the adherence to the Code of Conduct for all community councillors. Although I'm not sure about reading it out at the beginning of every meeting. I don't know if that's necessary. I think we have to understand we're dealing with people who give of their time and energy to local communities, and a lot of them are just going, what? That's all I can say. So at the same time, I want to reject the following. I want to reject the proposed new two-stage disciplinary and complaints procedure while retaining the existing complaints process overseen by the head of corporate governance. As per the guidance by officers and legal services, page 8, item 4.6, reject the designation of the Community Council convener as a politically exempt post. And then to reject the proposal for Disclosure Scotland checks as unnecessary and costly. It's been quite a costly exercise overall, but I don't think that we want to add to that. Finally, I would commend a future report on boundary changes following further evidence and community support, and that the scheme be reviewed again in 2030. I don't think that a number of problems is necessary the reason to change a whole system. I think these problems could have occurred whatever kind of system was in place. And I'm just reluctant to load onto community councils additional administrative and regulation at a time when I think we get the value of community councils in local areas, and I wanted to respect their voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Gilmer.
Thank you, convener. Perhaps Councillor Doyle's talking about reading out things, so perhaps I should read out the Local Government Act. In addition to any other purpose which a community council may pursue, the general purpose of a community council shall be to ascertain, coordinate and express to local authorities for its area and to the public authorities the view of the community which it represents in relation to matters for which those authorities are responsible, and to take such action in the interest of that community as it appears to be expedient and practicable. Provost, sometimes when you go to a community council, and I go to 4, along with my other colleagues, sometimes you hear things you don't like, but you know something, that's just a fact of life. So I listened to what Councillor Doig's amendment, and I felt that it seemed very negative. At one point, he insisted that a community council had gone rogue. So I was saying that 10 members of the community council have got a settled view, and who would complain if if all 10 have gone rogue? Who's going to complain? Would it be a councillor? Would it be a member of the public? And when they do complain, it will then be heard by someone who wasn't in the room when that statement was made. So I find that very difficult. I've also got issues, to be honest with you, about the complaints procedure, and it alludes to what Councillor Clark and Councillor Doig has raised. These people are volunteers. They give all their time to help their communities, and we are asking them to take an additional burden, and quite onerous. If you look at stage 1 complaints procedure and item 4, the resolution should be the satisfaction of the complainant, which may result in withdrawal of the complaint, etc., and be retained for 12 months. Be retained for 12 months. What secure place? Community councils can change. Someone might retire. So where's that document with my details of my complaint on it? Where's that going? How can I be confident that will be retained? You've got a GDPR issue there. On to section 2, and it leaves frankly, all parties concerned with a host of unresolved issues. There's going to be a panel appointed of people who might not have the training, the skills, or the expertise to ensure that myself, if I was the person being complained against, received a fair hearing. But again, remember, these people are volunteers. They're giving of their time. If there is a complaint and it is upheld, my personal reputation can be damaged within that community. Not just a community council member, but in my professional sense. So if I was still working, I then can be impugned. There's nothing here to say what recourse I have for redress of complaint. So your only then recourse would be to take it to court. Who would pay for the legal representation for community council? Do people know the onerous responsibility we're putting on them? I feel that the officers are better suited because, as Councillor Doig alluded to, they have the training, they have experience, they have expertise, and they have in the background other expertise they can draw on to make a decision. At that point, you've taken it out of the community council's hands and into the council, who, as Councillor Doig again quite rightly says, is publicly financed. So from my point of view, that's why we put up this motion. I feel that it is a step too far to ask volunteers to sit in judgment on other members of community council. And at that point, we don't know what would happen. It's unfair to ask members of the public to do that. Better to come to the professionals. Stage one can be resolved at a local level, absolutely. But stage two really should be resolved within the council. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Gilmer. Councillor Nicholson.
Thanks, Provost. With regards to the amendment, the amendments by Councillor Doig, I have had a chat with Councillor Doig about his amendments. There's a bit of work I think still to be done there, but I think it's achievable. I think having chairs read it out could have been better phrased as referencing 3.8 clause, as I said before. We live in a world where we have transparency statements in front of all our documents and papers. I don't think that's too much to ask community councils to have as well, references to their obligations. But I would like to ask him with regards to the stage 2 complaints, would he accept a full stop after officers? I think that's a matter for the council officers to decide who's best placed to hear complaints, not necessarily from a very specific department. There may be other reasons why that may be the case. So if he's happy to accept a full stop after officers and delete the rest, I think that will improve the amendment as well, if it gets through today for the officers. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Jill Graham.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'd like to say I fully support this amendment. Aspects of this paper increase bureaucracy, and for me it feels for some no tangible gain. More bureaucracy, it's the kind of thing that people find so frustrating about councils. It does feel, I know Councillor Doig, you mentioned a couple of community councils, but it does feel like the whole class has been put in detention because of a couple of pupils misbehaving. The suggested disciplinary process, I believe, will put people off joining community councils. Some members have already suggested they'll leave. They've said they'll leave if this new policy goes ahead as presented. With regard to political allegiances, in my view, a member of a community council can be a member of any political party they choose. That is their civil right. There's already a code of conduct in place to cover any political bias. And like many people here today, I've been both a member of a community council and attended many community councils as an elected member. I have to say, at no point over the decades I've been involved with community councils have I ever heard a political party mentioned once. Not once has a political party been mentioned in a community council I've attended. Some members of community councils will see themselves as being political with a small p, others won't. What drives them is their shared desire to improve their community. Community councils are representatives of the community and they have every right, as has been said, to question the council's service delivery. And in my experience, they do so, no matter what the colour of the administration, whether it's Labour, SNP or a minority, they will speak out and they should speak out. I'd urge members to support this amendment as it takes cognizance of the views of the community councils and the officers, and the policy, as we are suggested amended, supports our community councils and doesn't bind them with bureaucratic red tape. Thank you very much, Provost.
Thank you very much. I think, Jill, a couple of people have mentioned already in the debate about hearing uncomfortable things being said, or things being said about councillors or the council. That is a difference. There's a difference between that. Granted, I'm willing to hear uncomfortable statements about what the council gets wrong, absolutely. But there's a difference between that and downright abuse and allegations of misuse of funds directed towards a council administration. That's a completely different story. And I think that's perhaps what's driving a lot of the debate today. So you know, we really value volunteers. In fact, I wish we had more volunteers to join community councils. But the truth of the matter is that no matter what you do, if you're a volunteer, I've been a volunteer myself in a couple of organisations, had to go through the disclosure process, had to sign agreements saying that you will uphold the integrity of that organisation, and I don't know that, you know, we're asking that much different today. Okay, Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Thank you, Provost. I would just like to say I support the amendment by Councillor Doig, especially with the proviso that's been added by Councillor Nicholson. I think it is important that the community councils are properly governed, and I think there is a concern that all too often it's a dwindling number of people in a community council that are totally unrepresentative of the area they're meant to serve, and often that is due to people who have, what we say, the louder voices, who are aware that there is nothing that can get done to make them stick to the rules. Previously, a few years ago, I complained to officers about a certain community council who was consistently bullying and harassing visitors to the council, and the response was, "Oh, we can't do anything about it. It's up to the community council." I know as well they don't partake in community consultations. They share a sheet amongst themselves, see who's going to benefit from it, and then decide whether or not they'll tell anybody. So I think there needs to be greater scrutiny. I understand they're all volunteers, but as with every organisation, there's rules to follow. If they don't follow the rules, they shouldn't be there. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McLaren. Okay, we have no more speakers. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Provost. If I can, I'd like to respond to some of the comments that have been made by members across the chamber. Before doing so, make the position very, very clear that this is a decision for elected members to make in terms of what the scheme will look like going forward. And therefore, the opinions that I'm expressing are my views on these matters and why myself and Dave Lowe have made the proposals that we've made, but we will implement whatever is ultimately agreed by the council. Starting with Councillor Andy Doy's comments, I just want to be fair to the members of Fergusley Community Council. There was no accusation that Fergusley Community Council was acting in a political manner. Undoubtedly, there were comments made by the then chair of Fergusley Community Council which were overtly political. And those were raised with him and the other members of the Community Council. In respect of the other members of the Community Council, all of them confirmed that they were unaware he was making those comments. They did not support the comments he was making, and they were not comments made on behalf of the Community Council. He, when challenged on the content of those comments, then chose to resign, and that was the end of that particular matter. Renfrew Community Council were suspended for a period, and I have to say that part of that were overtly political comments that were being made by Community Council members on their Facebook page and in other locations. And that was part of the reason for the suspension. So there have clearly been instances of those types of matters arising. The reason we have suggested a complaints process, and this is picking up comment from Councillor Clark, there isn't currently a complaints process. What there is in the scheme is a power for me as the head of corporate governance to take action where, in my view, and it would be my personal view, the community council are not adhering to the scheme. And therein lies the problem. Taking the example of Fergusley Community Council, had the chair not resigned, I would then have had to take a decision on whether to suspend the whole community council because of the conduct of one individual. And the community council itself has no ability to deal with one member, even if the rest of the community council completely disagree with what that member is saying. Now, they could choose to have a vote and remove him as the chair, but they couldn't remove him as a community councillor. And that was part of the reason for putting forward complaints process. We as officers fully recognise that this was proposed previously, 2018, 2019, when we did the last review, and there was not a support amongst the community councils themselves, and ultimately it didn't find favour in the chamber. The scheme which is proposed, the complaints process, is a complaints process lifted from another council area. So it operates in their area, and those community councils within that area operate this scheme. Going back to Councillor Doid's comments about complaints about the community council chair or the whole community council, excuse me, I recognise that in terms of stage one, it does indicate that it should be sent to the chair, and if the complaint is specifically about the chair, what would then happen? I would have expected that the chair would have to pass that to the remainder of the community council for them to deal with. But if the complaint is about the whole community council in terms of what's actually proposed, it automatically goes to stage two. It doesn't go to the community council to determine, because clearly they can't determine a complaint about themselves if it's about all of them. So that is what is proposed. If as a result of this process, a complaints process is not agreed, then we will continue with the current system where matters fall to me. But I would have made clear that even if we brought the complaints process in, that provision would still remain. Because there would still be situations where perhaps no one has complained about the community council, but the community council is not adhering to the scheme. So if they weren't meeting, they weren't allowing members of the public to attend, they weren't publishing minutes, they're conducting meetings in private, not submitting their accounts, all of those things could still result in me taking action. So that would still sit there even if the complaints process was agreed. Final point I'd like to pick up in relation to the amendment. I appreciate Councillor Nicholson has suggested an amendment to Councillor Doig's amendment. I note it specifically refers to officers drawn from the Human Resources Department. I've had no opportunity of speaking to our head of HR, Raymond Cree, in respect of whether that could be supported. I don't know if officers from that service would be best placed to deal with these matters. I equally couldn't comment on the capacity of them to sustain a complaints process, and therefore, as an officer, I would be supportive of the suggestion that's come forward from Councillor Nicholson, that if this is the amendment which is to be passed, that it would be restricted to simply being a panel of council officers and leaving some discretion. For example, I would have thought I would have wished to put forward officers from my own service who would have experience of dealing with community councils and some understanding as to what the rules were there. So having said that out, as I say, this very much is at the end of the day a matter for councillors to decide. We've expressed our views as officers in respect of the various proposals that have been put forward, and also the comments which have been made by the community councils in response. Last thing I want to say is that to make changes to the scheme, we do require a 2/3 majority, which, given the number of councillors present today, would mean there would need to be 28 voting for one of the amendments. If we can't achieve that today, then the existing scheme would continue. I would not be proposing to bring this back to a further meeting, because I think if members have expressed their view and there is no consensus meeting that majority, I think that would conclude this review process and would leave us with the existing scheme to continue on for till the next review period. Thank you.
Okay. We go to the vote. Is Councillor Doig having, you've still to,
Can I sum up or clarify?
yes,
Yeah, thanks.
but would you particularly address the issue that Mark raised about where the officers would come from?
Right, I will do.
Specifically stated the human resources section.
Okay, having considered
Yeah.
Councillor Nichols, the comments made by Mark Conahan and the comments made by Councillor Nicholson, I'm happy to drop the last part, which is drawn from the Human Resources Department. So it would then simply read, Stage 2 complaints will be referred to an ad hoc panel of Renfrewshire Council officers, and leave it at that,
Okay.
if that would be acceptable.
Just hold on, have you got that?
Yeah.
Mark, yeah.
I mean, I take in point the points that Mark had made, and it reassures me that the whole of the committee in Ferguson Community Council weren't involved in political activity, but in a sense that's irrelevant because the convener was, and he, whether it was by design or inadvertently, this ended up in the local media, and the whole impartiality of the 3C was drawn into doubt. So I think that's a point I would like to make in response to that. I think we simply need more procedures. I don't think there's what I'm proposing. There's no bureaucracy attached to it. I mean, Councillor Graham had said, we don't need more bureaucracy. I think the reading out of clause 3.8 prior to the meeting would simply be an aid memoir. It's like a reminder. It's very much like Provost at the beginning of each public meeting here or at a board. The convener or yourself as the Provost reads out the item about it's a hybrid meeting. It's simply a reminder. There would be no bureaucracy attached to that, but I do think it might just help to remind people about the guidelines that they're within. And I take the point made by both Councillor Gilmer and Councillor Devine that community councils, you'd expect them to stand up, and that's their job, to stand up for their communities and to criticise if need be, but there's a way of doing that which is non-political or non-party political. And I think that is the key element here. I think we need changes. I mean, the current scheme as it is, I don't know if Mark can clarify. Community councils were set up in 1973. The world's changed a hell of a lot, Provost, since 1973. So I think it's really, it's due an overhaul, and I would just try and commend these to the elected members and try and get a 2/3 majority, I think.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Doig. Councillor Clark, do you want to say anything? I've allowed Councillor Doig to sum up to his amendment. It's not normal summing up
Okay,
amendments.
just a few comments, Provost. They'll
Yeah.
be very brief. It's not totally clear just exactly what we're voting for today. There was no clarity at the end of this report that, with a number, this is the recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think I've got a feeling of vagueness about how this will be applied and who will apply it, and just how we go forward. I tried to be as clear as I could in my amendment, but I'm just a bit concerned, we need a 2/3 vote. I just wonder if this is the time for us to be voting, or whether this could be taken away and brought back to us with a clarity of the actual
I think it would be helpful to have a short recess now, rather than bring back this whole issue to another meeting. It would maybe be worth taking 15 minutes now, rather than having to adjourn the meeting and then come back another day.
Provost, it's coming back anyway to discuss the areas involved.
I don't want any member to leave this chamber when I'm in this chair and not clear about what they're voting for. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just if members want 15 minutes to consider where this would be, but just to pick up Councillor Clark's point, in the report there is a draft scheme. That is what the report is asking you to agree. So you're being asked to agree in the report the scheme as attached. What Councillor Doig's amendment seeks to do is to change a couple of specific points in that revised scheme. So if his motion was to reach the 2/3 majority, then those changes would be made to the appendix, which is in the report. If your amendment was agreed, Councillor Clark, then the scheme would be agreed as is, but not with the two-stage disciplinary and complaints procedure. That would come out entirely because that's what your amendment makes clear. The other couple of comments about the guidance from officers rejects the designation of community council convener as a politically exempt post. That's not in the scheme that we've put forward. And rejects the proposal for disclosure Scotland checks. Again, that's not in the scheme that's put forward. So effectively, if we vote and Councillor Doig's motion passes, it's the scheme with the specific wording changes he suggested. And if your amendment passes, it's the scheme with the deletion of the complaints process in its entirety. Everything else goes through as is.
Provost.
It's one person at a time, please. Councillor Doig.
Just a question then. Does that mean, can we ask Mark, does that mean, I'm sorry, Provost, through yourself, Mark, can you explain then, does that mean then if the Councillor Clark's amendment was successful and got the 2/3, does that mean we would be left with no complaints process whatsoever?
Yeah, you would be left with the existing process that I outlined where I can suspend a community council if they don't comply with the requirements of the scheme, but there would be no complaints process other than that.
Okay. Do you, how are you feeling? Do you still want a recess? Are you all right?
With the greatest of respect, I mean, members do have other appointments this afternoon and into this evening. I think we should move to the vote.
I understand, but I've got to look out for all of the councillors in this chamber, Councillor Steele. So if anyone is unsure, then I don't want anyone leaving. But Councillor Clark, you've confirmed that you're okay with the explanation given. That's fine. So we'll move forward with the vote then. Councillor Graham, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much. It's a question to Mark. You mentioned a few years ago, Mark, this was looked at and it was turned down. Was that because community councils didn't want to run the disciplinary process? Because my understanding from this is that the new policy would be that the community councillors will run the process, and it doesn't look like there's any support from that from the community councils.
Yeah.
Thank you, Provost.
No, my recollection is the complaints process that was proposed at that time actually involved potentially councillors, as in Renfrewshire councillors, being the ultimate appeals panel, and community councils. The response, it was a slightly strange process in that it was consulted upon at the forum. And the outcome at the consultation initially at the forum was that those that were present at the forum didn't appear to express any concerns. That then went forward as has been done this time. It was effectively a 3-stage process. There was an initial consultation, second stage consultation, and then a 3rd stage paper. I think it was then at the 2nd stage consultation, after that complaints process was appearing, there was a bit of an uprising from members of community councils who perhaps had not been in attendance at the forum. And I think there was a lot of canvassing of elected members, and ultimately the complaints process was removed in its entirety. But it was not this complaints process, it was a different complaints process.
Okay, we'll go to the vote now. I'm just going to clarify how many members, as this vote is dependent on a percentage vote. I need to clarify what members are actually still in the meeting. I knew this special meeting was going to end up a problem.
Yeah, so down to West Ham. Sorry, just to clarify the hesitation there to members. I understand Councillor Montgomery's left the meeting, which then changes the numbers present, meaning that a 2/3 majority is now 27, just so that members are clear. So if we go to the vote, we have a motion by, we'll take Councillor Andy Doig's as the motion. So we have a motion by Councillor Andy Doig, seconded by Councillor Devine, and an amendment by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Gilmer. Could members confirm whether they're voting for Councillor Andy Doig's motion or Councillor Clark's amendment? Councillor Adam.
Motion.
Councillor Ailey Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Anne Dowling.
Amendment.
Councillor Burns.
Motion.
Councillor Jacqueline Cameron.
Motion.
Provost Cameron.
Motion.
Councillor Clark.
Amendment.
Councillor Davidson.
Amendment.
Councillor Devine. Councillor Andy Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Roger Doig.
Motion.
Councillor Gilmer.
Amendment.
Councillor Grady.
Amendment.
Councillor Gillian Graham.
Amendment.
Councillor Neil Graham.
Amendment.
Councillor Hood.
Motion.
Councillor Hughes. Councillor Leishman.
Amendment.
Councillor McFarlane.
Motion.
Councillor James McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Kenny McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor Mags McLaren.
Motion.
Councillor McCulloch. Amendment. Councillor MacDonald.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Councillor McGonigal.
Amendment.
Councillor Maguire.
Amendment.
Councillor McGurk.
Motion.
Councillor McMillan.
Amendment.
Councillor McNaughton.
Motion.
Councillor Mullen. Councillor Milet.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Patterson.
Motion.
Councillor Rodden.
She's intimated in the chat that she's voting for the motion. Her signal's dropping in and out.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Smith.
Amendment.
Councillor Steele.
Motion.
Councillor Hannigan has voted for the motion and Councillor Campbell has voted for the motion.
It's in the chat.
We have 24 for the motion, 16 for the amendment. That means that the motion has not met the required threshold, and therefore the matter effectively falls, and we will remain with the existing scheme.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone for your attendance.
Provost, can we do something with the lights in future, please? There's a lot of light bulbs out and most of us are in shadow as if it's a BBC. The ones in the middle are all out. Some of us look as if we're convicts or something and not wanting our faces to be seen.
Okay. We sat in that meeting was for nothing really.
No, not just
That special meeting was for nothing then.
not just that one, but the previous two.
Absolutely.
Oh. 16. I don't know what I said.